All right, good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Okay, all right. I want to welcome everybody to the Hebrew Congregation of St. Thomas's a panel discussion, The Role of Women in Religion, Past and Present. Before the rabbi gives a little invocation, I just wanted to tell all of you a little bit about the inspiration for this program and how I came about to do it. First of all, when I was a little girl, I went to Hebrew school, and we had to memorize the prayers. And I didn't really pay much attention to what they meant at the time, but all I remember is we would say, the God of our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And then many years passed, and I didn't go to synagogue. And all of a sudden I go, and all of a sudden I hear it's different. This is not what I learned in Hebrew school. And instead of the God of our fathers, it was God of our fathers and mothers. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. I said, oh, something's going on. I don't know, what, but something's happening. Another inspiration is, and you're going to hear very soon, from Marilyn Blackwell, who gave a very interesting talk about two women, ancient women, and that also got me thinking. And the third thing, which some of you might want to cover your ears because it's very controversial, last year the rabbi had a friend speak, and she's working on something called a gender swap Bible. And so wherever it referred to a he, it was a she. And believe it or not, Adam came from Eve's rib in her version. So again, this is a little controversial, but led me to think that maybe we should talk about the role of women in religion, past and present. And today is International Women's Day, so this is an exciting day to do it. Before we get to our speeches, the rabbi is going to give a short, Rabbi Margolis, for those who you don't know her, Rabbi Julia Margolis, will give a short invocation.
Thank you so much, Barbara, and thank you all for joining us today on this very special day. And Ribono Shel Olam, Master of the Universe, Elohei Avotenu ve'Imotenu, God of our fathers and mothers, as we gather to learn and reflect on this day of all of us, of women, we give thanks for the strength and for wisdom and courage of women in every generation. And may God bless our study and our conversation today, and may God will be with us and open our hearts to hear one another and inspire us to continue the work of justice, dignity, and equality. And may the voices of women, past and present, guide us and strengthen us. And may our learning today bring light, understanding, and hope to our community and to the world. And let us say, Amen. Thank you.
Okay, so now we're going to start. You all have a program, so I'm not going to go through the program. You have short bios of each of our speakers. What we're going to do is each one will come up and speak, and then following that, we'll take a few questions or comments from the audience. Either you would have to come up and speak into the microphone, or else the speaker will have to repeat the question so that the live streaming will work. So our first speaker is Allison Francis.
Good afternoon, distinguished leaders, honored guests, and beloved sisters. It is a privilege to stand in this sacred and historic space, the Hebrew Congregation of St. Thomas, a sanctuary that has carried faith, resilience, and community for over 230 years. To be invited to speak on International Women's Day, reflecting the role of women in religion, past and present, is a profound honor. Across every generation and every faith tradition, one truth remains constant. When a woman rises, destiny shifts. A few women demonstrated this more clearly across the Bible. Many women, when you look in the Bible, would have stand firm, and would have shifted destiny. One such woman comes to mind, and one that I really resonate with is Abigail. And who is this Abigail, you may say? Abigail, a woman who rose in a moment. You find her nestled in 1 Samuel 25. Abigail is introduced with two words: intelligence and beauty. Her beauty was not merely outward. It was beauty of discernment, inner strength, and spiritual clarity. She lived in a household where her husband Nabal's reckless decisions placed everyone in danger. When David, future king of Israel, marched towards her home, her community, with over 400 armed men, Abigail stepped forward, not as a victim, not as a silent bystander, but as a woman who understood the moment and moved with God's given authority. Her life gives us three timeless truths about women of faith, past and present. Women of faith discern the moment. Abigail saw what others did not see. She recognized danger and opportunity. Discernment is the quiet voice of the Spirit saying, move now, speak now, intervene now. That same discernment is alive in every woman here today. There was a woman named Marissa who worked at a community center. One evening, she saw a group of young men outside, arguing and shouting, ready to fight. Most people would have retreated back inside, closed the door, and pretended that they didn't see. Not Melissa. Something stirred inside of her. Something strong inside of her. She stepped out, and with a soft voice, she said, not tonight. It will not happen here tonight. Her voice, as I said, was not loud, but it carried weight. The atmosphere shifted. The crisis was averted. One boy later said to her, if you hadn't come out, I would have done something I could not take back. That is discernment in action. That is the Abigail anointing at work. Number 2, women of faith, as we are, move with courage. Discernment without action is incomplete. You may discern something, but if you do nothing about it, it is incomplete. Abigail didn't just see danger. She confronted it. She gathered provisions, she mounted a donkey, and rode straight towards 400, imagine that, 400 armed men. Picture that, a woman in that day, going out to face 400 armed men. That is what you call courage. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to move anyway. It is the moment when a woman says, not in my house, not in my community, not on my watch. And that's the one I like. I like to say that, not on my watch. When I have an issue, not on my watch. Abigail's courage saved her household. It also saved David from making a disastrous choice. Women of faith have always carried this kind of courage, often quiet, often without recognition, but always with impact. Number 3, women of faith use their voices wisely. When Abigail reached David, she spoke with humility, yet strong, and with clarity. Her words were so powerful that David stopped in his track and blessed her because of her discernment. Her voice shifted the atmosphere. I'm talking about the voice and the power of the voice and the words that we speak. Her voice changed the outcome. Her voice redirected a destiny. A wise woman's voice can calm storm, break tension, bring peace, restore order, and release blessings. Abigail reminds us that empowered women, like we are, speak life, not chaos. We speak wisdom, not confusion. We speak purpose, not fear. As a result of Abigail's action, here is her reward. After Nabal's death, David honored Abigail. But her true reward was divine vindication. God honored her wisdom, her courage, and her obedience. And today, as we stand in this historic sanctuary, we honor the countless women across faith, across generation, who have done the same thing. Women who have discerned the moment. Women like us who acted with courage. Women whose voice shaped communities and preserved faith. So today, I speak over every woman here today, in this room. The Abigail's anointing is alive in you and in me. You are a woman who shifts atmospheres. You are a woman who move and protect destiny. You are a woman who carry divine assignment. You are a woman of wisdom, strength, and spiritual authority. As we honor the past and stand in the present, may the spirit of Abigail empower you to rise boldly in every area of your life, to stand, to speak, to intervene, and to influence other women, our community, and the world for the glory of God. As we move into our discussion this afternoon, I leave you with this. Abigail did not rise because her circumstances were perfect. She rose because her purpose was greater than her circumstances. And that is the story of women of faith across generation. Women rise not because our circumstances are in order, but we rise because our purposes are greater than the circumstances. Women who discern the moment, who step into difficult spaces, and whose voices carry wisdom and peace. I look forward to your question, and I look forward to hearing from all of you. May we rise in the spirit of Abigail, and may her anointing be upon you even today as we convene together. God bless all of you. Thank you.
Does anybody have any comments or questions for Allison? No, talk it. Oh, okay, Beth? Oh, wait, okay. If they'll come up here or we'll repeat the question.
It's very scary to take these actions and stand against adversity and challenge. And it is alienating often to take those steps. What do you say to that?
Okay, you want to repeat what she said?
So your comment was that it's very alienating, it's very concerning, it's not the easiest thing to do in the world in which we live. And you wanted to know what would my response be. Well, think of Abigail. It was the same thing in the days of Abigail. It was unheard of for women to speak. It was unheard of for women to go before an army of men. They had no relationship whatsoever, yet Abigail rose in the power that was within her. So for us, despite the circumstances that are around us, despite what may seem to be challenging, once the Lord has laid it upon you to move, you move, because God will protect you and he will give you the victory in the end. So you move. You keep moving, because that's what we have to do to make a difference in the world today. We have to take a bold step, a bold stand, and even if it costs us our life, the legacy that we would leave behind for those who are coming will be a woman stood against all odds and she prevailed. Any more questions? Anybody else have another question? Anyone else? A comment? Anything? No? Thank you guys again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Allison. That was wonderful. Okay, our next speaker is Marilyn Blackhall, the president of the Hebrew Congregation of St. Thomas. Okay.
I just want to say that was an amazing speech. Everything that you said just resonated in me, and I don't even have to go any further. I could stop and not even do mine because she expressed everything that I feel. But nevertheless, here I go. On this International Women's Day, I want to invite us back into the Palace of Shushan, to the world of the Book of Esther, the biblical story read by Christians and Jews, and especially by Jews on the Jewish holiday of Purim, which was just a few days ago, and that tells how a young Jewish woman in Persia found the courage to save her people. And I want us to take another look at two women we were often taught to see as opposites. Vashti, the existing queen of Persia, who refused the king's command to appear before his drunken court, and Esther, the Jewish woman who would later become a queen. For a long time, the story felt simple. Vashti was the bad queen, defiant, difficult, disposable. Esther was the good queen, obedient, beautiful, and brave at the right moment. But today, especially as women reflecting together, we know that life isn't that simple, and neither are these women. Instead of rivals, we see them as two different voices, two strategies, two powerful expressions of what women's strength can look like, and together they change the Jewish history. Let's start with Vashti. The palace of Shushan is a place of excess and ego. The king is drunk, the men are drunk, and the queen is summoned, not for counsel, not for leadership, but to be displayed. And it doesn't say anywhere naked, but it implies that. To be looked at, disregarding her individuality and only looking at her sexual attraction and availability, to be objectified. And Vashti says no. We don't get her speech. We don't get her inner thoughts, but that one act speaks volumes. In a world where women were treated as property, she refuses to be put on display. She risks everything, her crown, her security, her safety, to protect her dignity. Vashti teaches us that sometimes the most powerful thing a woman can say is no. No to humiliation, no to injustice, no to systems that treat her at less than fully human. Her refusal shakes the palace. In fact, it causes what we might call patriarchal panic, quote unquote. Suddenly, the king and his advisors are terrified that if one woman says no, all women might say no. And honestly, that fear tells us just how powerful her act was. But Vashti disappears from the story. And then comes Esther. Esther enters the same palace, the same systems, the same risks, but her approach is very different. If Vashti represents the bold exit, Esther represents the careful entrance. Esther hides her identity. She listens, she watches, she learns how the system works. She builds relationships, she survives. At first, her strength is quiet, strategic, patient. But here's the key. Esther is shaped by what happened to Vashti. She knows exactly what can happen to a queen who openly defies the king. She lives in the shadow of her knowledge. And yet, when Haman's decree threatens the Jewish people with destruction, something shifts. Esther moves from silence to speech, from hiding to revealing. I will go to the king, she says, even though it is against the law. and if I perish, I perish. In that moment, she brings together both models of courage. She keeps her strategy, but she adds Vashti's boldness. She takes the power she has carefully built and risks it for all of her people. Together, Vashti and Esther show us a full spectrum of leadership. Vashti teaches that dignity is not negotiable. Esther teaches that access to power, even imperfect power, can be used for the sake of community. Vashti is the activist who says, this system is wrong. Esther is the activist who says, I'm going to work inside it and change the outcome. And our Jewish story needs both. We need the women who walk away from injustice and refuse to participate. And we need the women who stay at the table long enough to shift the conversation. Modern Jewish feminist voices have helped us reclaim Vashti, not as a villain, but as a woman claiming bodily autonomy. In an era shaped by conversations about consent and dignity, her refusal feels incredibly relevant. And Esther's courage, her decision to publicly claim her Jewish identity in a dangerous moment, still resonates deeply in a world where identity can feel complicated and sometimes risky. And perhaps this is part of what International Women's Day invites us to recognize. The courage of women is not one single story. It is many stories, sometimes quiet, sometimes loud, sometimes strategic, sometimes immediate. Some of us are called, like Vashti, to set boundaries and protect our dignity and the dignity of others. And some of us are called, like Esther, to step forward at the right moment and use whatever voice or influence we have to protect our community. Both forms of courage require strength, both require wisdom, and both remind us that the actions of women, sometimes unseen, sometimes underestimated, can shape the course of history. This is a story about choosing between them. It is about honoring both. On this Women's Day, may we celebrate the courage to say no to being diminished, silenced, or objectified. And may we celebrate the courage to say yes to leadership, to risk, to showing up for our people. Within each of us lives a little of Vashti and a little of Esther. The part that protects our dignity and the part that steps forward when others need us most. The story of Vashti and Esther isn't just about survival. It's about many of the forms that courage can take. May we as women have the wisdom to know how to refuse. May we as women have the strength to know when to act. May we as women, like these two queens together, continue shaping the future of our communities with courage, with dignity, and with the knowledge that our voices, our choices, and our leadership truly matters and makes a difference.
Another amazing speech. Does anybody have any comments or questions regarding Marilyn's speech? Okay, I guess you said it all. Okay. Oh, wait, we have one. Come back. All right, you want to either come up or do you want to say something? All right, come.
We have people online that are seeing this, so they don't hear.
Yeah, we have to, be in the mic. Okay.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so very much for all being here.
Can we speak better into there?
and thank you so much for having me. Yes, I do have a question for you, and my name is Monica. And my question is, I can see Vashti. She was a little bit brave, and she was a little bit aged. Then I can see Esther. She was young, but she knew when to act. My question today is, when is the right time for Esther to arise for the community? As we say, the group we have today, I don't see the Esther. I'm seeing only the voice of Vashti. Where are the Esthers of today? So is there anything that Vashti or you doing to arise the youth? Because the voice that is being heard or the access of resources are more with Vashti and not Esther, even though we still exist. So what are you doing for us, Esthers, that are down there and we don't have access of what the Vashti has? I can still see the same thing here with Nabel, and I'm sorry to repeat the same thing, but since I'm here, let me just ask. When I see the Nabel of this day, it might be maybe our parents are big Nabel of today. We cannot be able to offer what we have because of the big title that is ahead of us. Yes, I know there is a yes, but I'm just going to continue saying no because I'm scared of Nabel. So what are you all doing for us that know we can say yes, but we don't know what to say? And still we can see our generation is out there. If this girl by the name Abigail, she did not act the very moment, the whole community could vanish. But she take it, say, either I die or I live. And that's why. And the resources were around her. They say, you know what? I know this is my husband and I might lose it. But yes, I gonna worthy the community. And she arise and she offer. And you know what followed? David end up having her as a queen. But in real sense of today, our Nabels are resources. Our Nabels are finances. Our Nabel of today is our parents. They don't want to speak. They still see us as little. They still see us as wife of that day, Abigail. But she said, you know what, Nabel, I know you are foolish man, but I'm going to stand up and I'm going to save my community. Thanks God it was yes for her. So what are you all doing to empower us? As Abigail, we need help. As Vashti, it's too loud, but I'm here, Esther. I know what to do. Remember, I don't have a parent. Remember, the only closer route I have is only my, the guard man on the gate. But still, remember, I have an accent, right? Because she did not belong. And when everything was being cooked on the pot, they did not know who was around in the parties. Luckily, there was a bigger voice for her in order for her to access the whole thing that was going on. So, what are you doing for us? That's my question. And thank you.
Well, I first of all, I think we need another whole meeting like this with 8 more speakers to address what you are talking about as to what it is we're actually doing. The second thing I feel, I'm an older person, but I don't live that way. If you ask me how old I am, I'm as young as you are in many ways. I'm as young as, I just do not adhere to that. And therefore, I think each and every one of us has a role to play in making our world better. On the other hand, we have a real challenge in our congregation and to bring in youth. We are not bringing in young people. It's very difficult, and the young people, they go to other places. I know Chabad can address that. They deal with a lot of younger people as well. So it's just another entire situation, and I think we all need to work on it And we try to work on it in our synagogue, but I can't say that we're 100% successful. Now, and I'm not going to keep going on and on, except to say that, for example, I am a Rotarian. The Rotary has a lot of they have young groups in the high schools. They have young, like people in their 20s who have separate Rotary clubs and so forth. And they are working all over the world to work with people, so, you know, as young people, to work with other people. So this is going on in the rest of the world. It may not be quite as obvious in our community, and maybe we need to make it greater, but it is, the youth are doing things in the world today. So that's my answer.
Does anybody else want to add anything to the comments on this before we move on? Wait, who wants to? Oh, you want to? Well, or, okay. All right, our next speaker is Dr. Celia Victor.
Good afternoon, everyone. It has been an honor to be here to discuss the role of women in religion and past. And as I listened to you, that was the same question I had as I was asked to do this. I'm from the Virgin Islands. I grew up here, went to Catholic school. And the persons who taught me religion were, I would say, not the nuns. They were actually pastors. And so the pastor at the time created a curiosity of the children of Saints Peter and Paul. We were ages from 14 to 16, 17. And the goal for us, for the minister, was to awaken the Bible in us. So who are the characters of the Bible? Why do we go to Mass? Why do we go to the synagogue? Who are we? And so as a 14-year-old girl, I was kind of fascinated by Jesus, the books of the gospel. As a young girl, I wasn't shown to see the women of the Bible. I was shown to see the heroes of the Bible, and many times they weren't women. They were the apostles, they were the prophets, etc., etc. As I got older, someone gave me a women's Bible. I was like, wow, what is that? You begin to look at Genesis with Eve, all the way through the Bible, all the heroes that inspires us to be great. And so when I looked at my assignment, I said to myself, well, this is International Month, this is National Month. What do I say to women, to girls, not just women? Because once I was a girl, I'm still kind of a girl. But I looked at some stories of the Bible that make me look at where things are in the world. For women, the challenges we face as mothers, as leaders, as advocates, as grandmothers, as aunties, etc. So I chose a very interesting story. The story of Martha and Mary. It was interesting to me as a child. Jesus showed up and decided to throw a party. That's what I saw as a child. You had two sisters. You had Mary. She shows up, sitting on the feet of Jesus, hanging out with him, chilling out with him. Then you had the other sister, Martha, running around the kitchen, running around everywhere, making sure the party was going to have every single thing to be done. And when I read through the story as a young girl, I said, why did Jesus say to the sister who was running around making sure the napkin and everything was in order that she needed to chill out, not be so stressed out, and come back to his feet? What does that teach us as women, as girls? When do we take the time to slow down, to not be so anxious in the world, to run behind our challenges, run behind our assignments, and not take the time to sit at Jesus' feet and to hear a message? Sometimes, as women, I have a sister who has a 1-year-old daughter, and she very seldomly has time to sit on the seat to read her Bible. She's running around to make sure her daughter goes to violin classes and chess classes and skating. And my job as the big sister is to say, hey, it's time to sit at the feet of Jesus. And so I looked at that story, and that was one of the things I thought about. How do you balance getting things done as a woman, as a girl, and yet focus on the will of God? Now I move on to another story, Hannah, Samuel 1-2. That story is very difficult for me at times. She wants a child. She goes to the synagogue. She's always praying, and no child comes. And over and over and over again, she continues to pray. And then one day, the answer comes. She will have a son. And this son would be very different from most. I call him the gangster prophet. Now, when I was reading this book, The Women of the Bible, I got to a particular chapter Judges. Judges 4 and 5. When I asked the question, was there ever a female prophet? Because all throughout growing up in school and in churches, no one talked about Deborah, the prophet, the judge, the wife of Lapadiah, who also showed courageous leadership. In Judges, she trusted God's call to lead Israel into victory, showing us that God empowers women to lead and serve with strength and wisdom. As we look at these stories, as she just shared, how do we empower the next generation of girls, of women, to look at the strengths within these stories, to look at ourselves, and as Mary and Martha, get things done, but still sit at the feet of Jesus? So these are the questions that I ask. How can we prioritize spiritual growth, serving others, trusting God's plan as Hannah, and leading to lead when there is no courage, or when there's an issue of silence, as someone mentioned before, or the issue of saying no? Recently, I taught a class at the University of the Virgin Islands with a bunch of leaders, and I asked the question, are you a leader? Are you born a leader or no? Are you an advocate, yes or no? And the responses to all these young women were, we live in a community where people are afraid to speak up. They are afraid of representation. And I said to them, somebody has to speak up when no one wants to. So in the story of Esther, as I reflect on Esther, when she was told, if she does not speak up, someone else will. And she decided to speak up and have the voice. So please remember, at times, it may be silent, and you may be the only person speaking up. But as a child of God, this is the time when we must speak up as women. And I believe we can.
Does anybody have any comments for Celia's speech? Questions, comments? Okay, all right, moving right along. Our next speaker is Dr. Reva Richardson.
Good afternoon. Very great discussions, and as I was saying to Dr. Victor, I think you guys already did what I was supposed to do, so I should probably just take my seat because you addressed my topics. But I'm grateful for this opportunity to be here with you, and thank you, Rabbi, for the opportunity to share on this evening on this important topic. I just wanted to talk about the fact about how women were silent and how their voices evolved into that ability to have leadership and faith today. So as I was reflecting, I thought back about in the 1800s, back in India, there were 3 men that came to a home of an American young woman. Her name was Ida Scudder. And they all had the same request. Their request was that they had wives that were in labor and they needed medical help. But there was a problem. Because of the cultural customs back in those days, these women refused to be examined by a male physician. So Ida Scudder was not a doctor, so these men came, asked her to help, but she was unable to because of not having the medical experience. By the next morning, all 3 women had died during childbirth. And that night changed Ida's life forever. She later wrote that she could not escape the question, if I do not go back and help these women, who will? And so she returned to the United States. She studied medicine, and then she went back to India as a physician. And eventually she founded what is now called the Christian Medical College of Vellore, one of the most respected medical institutions in the world. What began as a woman responding to suffering became a movement of healing that continues to this day. And what strikes me most about her story is that she wasn't trying to become a leader. She was simply responding to the call to serve. And in many ways, her story reflects my personal story, as well as that of women that have journeyed through faith throughout history. Women whose voices were sometimes quieted by culture, but whose calling refused to remain silent. Women who moved from silence to serving to being sent. For much of human history, society was structured in ways that limited women's public role. In ancient Greek and Roman societies, women were often excluded from formal education, public debates, and civic leadership. Their primary roles were within the household. And religion often reflected that same culture. And so in many traditions, sacred texts were interpreted in ways that encouraged women to nurture faith within the home, while public leadership roles were largely reserved for men. In Christianity, certain passages such as those in 1 Corinthians and 1 Timothy were historically interpreted in ways that limited women's public teaching roles. So as a result, for centuries, women's voices in many faith communities were often quieted or confined to the background. But silence did not mean absence. Even when women were not leading publicly, they were often the ones preserving and transmitting faith. Historically, they were teaching children their prayers, organizing community life, caring for the sick, supporting charitable work, and sustaining spiritual traditions within families. In the early Christian church, many congregations actually met in the homes of women. For example, in the book of Acts, we read about Lydia, and whose home became a gathering place for believers. And in the New Testament, Phoebe, she was described as a deacon who assisted the early church. So while formal leadership were often limited, women were deeply involved in shaping spiritual communities. And in many ways, they were the quiet architects of faith. And yet, throughout scripture and history, they were also the women whose leadership became unmistakable. And we heard of these ladies today from the former speakers. Deborah, Miriam, who helped with Moses, Esther, we heard about her. Those stories remind us that influence of women in faith traditions have deep historical roots. And in the New Testament, we heard about Mary and Martha. And then also Mary Magdalene, who became the first witness of the resurrection and the first person who was sent to share that message. And later in Christian history, there are other women like Hildegard of Bingen. She was a theologian that had this influence in Europe, as well as the Sojourner of Truth, who was who was also a preacher in the 19th century that had a bold connection between faith and justice. These are women who remind us that even when structures attempted to limit our roles, calling often found a way to be expressed. And even in the Caribbean, there are women who have done such. Rebecca Protten, she was a woman who was born in the Danish West Indies in the 18th century. And after gaining her freedom, she became a Moravian missionary and traveled throughout the Caribbean and even to Europe, sharing her faith. At a time when women were often not permitted to preach or to hold official leadership titles, they began organizing women missionary societies. And these organizations sent thousands of women across the world. They were able to establish schools for girls, hospitals and clinics, literacy programs, and also ministries. And in fact, by the early 20th century, historians estimated that 2/3 of the missionaries sent abroad from Protestant churches were women. Through education, healthcare, and service, women have transformed communities across Asia, Africa, and Latin America. And their ministry did not always take place in churches and pulpits, but they often happen in classrooms, villages, and clinics. And so this brings me back to something that's very personal for me. Some of the most extraordinary missionaries were female physicians and nurses. And in many cultures, women who were not allowed to be treated, as I mentioned in my introduction, they were able to use these female medical missionaries to help to provide the medical care as well as to minister to these ladies. They were able to build hospitals, train nurses, deliver babies, and provide the care that otherwise were not available. Dr. Clara Swain, she was able to establish a hospital in India, and Dr. Shooter, she did something very similar. So because of these women, and because of the ability to see that you can rise above the restrictions of your faith, today we are able to see women who are able to be physicians, women who are able to be pastors, women who are able to overcome their fears and be able to help the world, whether in ministry or in medicine. Caring for people in their moments of vulnerability and helping them to move forward in healing. Today, we are living in a moment where the voices of women in faith are becoming more visible. Across many traditions, women now serve as pastors, rabbis, theologians, scholars, missionaries, chaplains, and community leaders. But perhaps the most important lesson from history is this, that women are not newly entering the story of faith. They have always been a part of it.
Does anybody have any questions or comments? Oh, okay.
Thank you so much for your presentation, very inspiring. The concern that I have with us here as women lies deep within my heart. It is simple, this for me. I truly believe that in each and every one of us, we were born leaders. I believe that we came from heaven, we came from God to earth. And I believe that when we came from God to earth, we came empowered and endowed with our gifts and our talents and all that we need to be successful in this life. God, who He is not working on us. He's already finished the work in us. It is time that we recognize that the power lies within us, not outside of us. Because even to your questions, you asked, who's going to help the Esthers? What about you? Why don't you be the Esther? Why don't you be the Ruth? Why don't you be the Naomi, the Abigail? Why are we waiting rather than moving into what God has called us to be? God is not working on us. He's finished with us. And He's expecting us as women to rise, to be bold, and to be courageous, and to go forward. We can speak all afternoon until you have a passion, until you have a dream, a goal, a desire, until the problem bothers you enough for you to move, we will not move. We will wait for somebody else to do it rather than take the challenge and go forth knowing that you must win. We must win. We're more than one. We're more than two in this room this afternoon. And we're women that are empowered, women that have strength, women who has been through and is still going through but standing strong. Standing strong in the power of God, knowing that we can accomplish much if we just trust Him and go forward. Let your spirit rise. Let the power within you rise. This is the time for us to rise as a people, as women, and go forward. God bless all of you. Thank you so much.
Okay, our next speaker from the Chabad movement is Hannah Jaffe.
All right. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. It's so special being here with all of us. So we hear the historical woman, and it's empowering, but let's bring it home. There are three things that affect us deeply regularly. These are our immediate environment, if it's sunny out, if our office is cluttered, if it's raining, the food that we eat, and our intimate life. Judaism teaches us it's our role to refine and elevate whatever it is we encounter. These three areas were specifically given to us women to refine and transform. I say this as a woman to woman, and the men who are here listening as well, but this is also personal to me because it's found in my name, Hannah. The acronym of which the Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, pointed out is Chala, which refers to the food we eat, Nida, referring to our intimate lives, and Hadlakat Nerot, illuminating our surroundings. The gift we were given to turn our meals from self-indulgent to refined experiences, either by saying a blessing before or the people we're sharing our food with, so to our intimate life, to transform it to a refined, holy experience, and last, illuminating our surroundings by lighting candles Friday afternoon before sunset. Women throughout history, going back to our matriarchs, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, and our grandparents, from wherever we are, we found ourselves lighting those candles in the desert, in Sarah's tent, hidden in Russia, in our little kitchens, the beautiful synagogues in Europe, and here in St. Thomas. We're part of that chain that's been going for thousands of years. There's a beautiful story written in Joseph Telushkin's book where he writes, Avram Berkowitz was traveling with a few of his friends. They were traveling to a city in Alaska, a small town, and they were planning on speaking to the schools, and the mayor told him, it's a small town, you're not finding anybody here to speak to, but trying his luck, he spoke to this fourth grade class to empower the women, and he asked, have any of you ever met a Jewish woman? And one of the students, pointed to the fifth grade teacher, and yes, my mother. And the mother was taken aback. We're living in a random little city in Alaska. Who would ever think? And she was emotional. She told Avram Berkowitz, please, what can you share with my daughter to have that Jewish pride, to have that woman pride, to do something, and Avram Berkowitz is thinking, he only has a moment. From all things, what is he sharing with her? There's tons and tons of woman empowerment, which which of our matriarchs, which of our prophets, what will resonate? And he took a moment and continuing that chain. This girl, she was a big geography fan. She loved learning about the world. And so he asked her, where is the first place in the world where the sun sets? And she said, Australia, New Zealand, right? We have that. And where's the last? Where in the world, as we're going through the globe, where is the last place? This little city where she was. And the Avram Berkowitz shared with her that women throughout the world, not just history we know, thousands and thousands and thousands of years, the women are continuing this chain whichever circumstances we're in, whether we know how chaotic life can get, right? On islands it might be a bit easier, but it's still, we know, and we know what we go through. And going back to this little city is where the last city in the world that the sun sets. And by her lighting a candle Friday afternoon before sunset, completes the light following throughout the globe. And if she lights a candle, it will complete that full circle moment. And I bless each and every one of us that we can find that light, whether it is Friday afternoon, lighting that candle, or at the end of the day, finding a moment where we can illuminate our surroundings, having a moment to ourselves with our loved ones, and reminding ourselves what truly matters, what's important. You know, we're always coming and going and working and making a living. When are we living? When are we stopping? When are we pausing? Shabbos, lighting candles, is a perfect opportunity to pause, breathe. The sun is setting, what's important? So I bless you all that we should have that moment, have that inner strength to pause. Yes, we're doing, yes, we're living, yes, we're working, standing up for ourselves, our people, our families, but we need to pause and appreciate what we've done, continuing that, and lighting that candle in ourselves, in our family, and our surroundings. So thank you very much.
Anybody have any comments for Hannah? Or okay, well, thank you. I guess our next speaker is Susan Harmer from the Baha'i Center.
Good afternoon. How about you women? Come on, let's do it. It's been a wonderful afternoon. Thank you to the Hebrew congregation for reaching out to us in the Baha'i community. We appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today, with all of you, gentlemen included, especially gentlemen. Thank you, Barbara, for persevering. She had to do a little bit of sleuthing to find me, but she did, so thank you for persevering. Oh, I'm starting on page 4 instead of page 1. This could be tragic, so I'm at the end already. What I'd like to do today is just give you a very short perspective and to share the Baha'i view on the role and dignity of women. The Baha'i faith is a relatively young world religion founded in the mid-19th century, and from its very beginning it placed the equality of women and men at the very center of its teachings. It's not a reform within the faith that came later. It is at the very core principle of how the faith moves forward and how we see the world. I'd like to explore just a couple little things. We were told we just had 5 to 7 minutes, so I came with 5 to 7 minutes of quick chatter here, sharing. I'd like to share just a portion of the Baha'i writings about women and how they're perceived today, and also how women have been viewed in the Baha'i community over time. When the Baha'i faith emerged in Persia in the 1840s, society was deeply patriarchal. Women were largely excluded from education, public life, and certainly from religious leadership. And it was into this world that this very revolutionary teaching came. Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i faith, proclaimed that women and men are as two wings of one bird. A bird, as we know, cannot fly if one of its wings is broken. And that was not meant to be a metaphor for politeness. It was a call for complete social transformation. One of the earliest and most dramatic examples of this principle was a woman by the name of Tahereh, a poet, a scholar, and one of the first followers of the Bab, who was the forerunner of Baha'u'llah. She publicly removed her veil at a gathering of male religious leaders in 1848 and declared, "You can kill me as soon as you like, but you cannot stop the emancipation of women." She was executed for her beliefs, but her courage became a symbol of the new age of the that the Baha'i faith envisioned. As the Baha'i community grew, women increasingly took on roles that were unheard of in that cultural context. In the late 1800s, Baha'i girls' schools were established in Iran when educating girls was considered dangerous. Women served and were elected, essentially, to serve on the local and national administrative bodies long before women had the vote in many countries. And Abdu'l-Baha, who was the son of the founder of the faith, Baha'u'llah, and the authorized interpreter of his writings, traveled to Europe and North America between 1911 and 1913, and repeatedly emphasized that the equality in men and women is a prerequisite for world peace. And when he left, he was living in what is now Israel. When he left, he knew that he would be gone for an extended period of time. And to ensure that the workings of the faith did not stop, before he left, he appointed an individual to serve as the head of the faith, a temporary head. And that individual, who served as the head of a world religion, was none other than his sister, who was 65 at the time, Bahia Khanum. And she was charged with the spiritual and administrative guidance of the Baha'i world, of a world religion. And that is what women can do. One of the most frequently quoted passages on this subject from Baha'u'llah is that women and men have been and will always be equal in the sight of God. It was a radical statement in the 19th century, and sadly, it is unfortunately still sometimes in many places a radical statement. They say that the writings go on further, the Baha'i writings go on further, and they say that the education of girls is even more important than the education of boys, because mothers are the first educators of the next generation. It's not a sentimental statement, it's a strategic one. If you want to transform society, you have to empower the first teachers of humanity. Another key teaching is that equality is not sameness. The Baha'i writings acknowledge that men and women have different strengths, but these differences do not imply superiority or inferiority. They're complementary, like the organs of our body. Today, Baha'is understand these teachings as a mandate to work for equal access to education, equal participation in decision-making, the elimination of gender-based violence, the transformation of cultural norms that limit either women or men. Equality is not a slogan. It is a spiritual principle that must be expressed in our daily lives. The Baha'i teachings insist that society must value traditionally feminine qualities, compassion, cooperation, empathy, just as much as traditionally masculine ones. A peaceful world requires both. From its earliest days, the Baha'i Faith has taught the equality of women and men is not optional. It is essential for the progress of humanity. It is essential for justice. It is essential for peace. We live in a time when the world is struggling with conflict, polarization, and fragmentation. The Baha'i writings tell us that humanity will not achieve unity until women participate fully and equally into every sphere of life. So the question is not whether women should be equal. The question is whether we, as individuals, as communities, are willing to transform our habits, our institutions, and our assumptions to make that reality, to make that equality real. Thank you. I kept it brief, my 5 minutes. I think I did good. So as not to stress anyone, but thank you again for the opportunity to share some oversights, some very general information with you, and very much appreciate the opportunity.
Does anybody have any comments or questions for Susan? Marilyn.
I wasn't going to say anything because it's a tough subject, but this situation of equality of women is something that is so deep in me that I was instrumental in our synagogue getting gender-neutral prayer books that where God is not described as a he. It's God. There are Hebrew words, Adonai or God, but you just keep using that word over and over again instead of he. And it isn't any better to say she either, because we're talking about the equality of men and women. So when I saw this poster, I was just taken aback, and I want to frame it, the thing. So I'm just wondering how the rest of you, or any of the rest of you, feel about this situation of the equality of men and women in not only in religion, but in life in general, and of seeing how we can achieve it by doing, for example, gender-neutral prayers and things like that. So I don't know if anybody has any comments on that or thoughts on that.
You know, I think it's an interesting question. I think times have changed. We've moved forward. We feel somehow a need to make things gender neutral. I don't know that, and this is me speaking personally, not necessarily a perspective, something I've seen written in the writings, but the language of revelation is what it is. If it's he or she, it's the language of revelation from a manifestation of God. And if they say he at some point or they say she, I find it acceptable. I don't feel the need to neutralize what has been revealed. I know that there is certainly within society today, many people feel that there is a need for that. I think what's more important is to understand and appreciate the message that is trying to be conveyed by that entity, that spirit, and it moves us, whether it's he or she, we're moved, whether it's a man or a woman. If something touches us, it touches us. It doesn't matter who it comes from. So while I certainly appreciate, and I'm sure the community congregation does as well, your efforts, hopefully that's not what moved them, you know, the neutrality, but rather the message. And I'm sure it was. So bless you for making that effort to do that, find that. I'm sure it wasn't easy. So yes, I don't know.
This is a discussion we have.
It's a tremendously, yeah, it's a wonderful, and I hope, yes, I hope this has been a wonderful opportunity, and I do really want to thank the Hebrew congregation for making this possible on this day, which is so important, not just recognizing the importance of women, but recognizing we do exist here with men. We can't do it without them. We have to do it together. You know, women like to have their hands held. We want you to come with us, you know. So it is possible. It will happen. We are patient. We are long-serving. It will happen. But there must be, until we find a way to have those two wings of that bird on the same plane, women are not going to be able to reach their true purpose, to soar. So here's hoping that we can continue to work together, Marilyn. I'm sure there are others that we would appreciate being able to gather together and discuss these very important topics, and about the empowerment of youth, finding youth. It is so critical for our faiths to move forward, to empower our youth. So, Ms. Victor?
I just love what you said. I am a member of Children and Youth Task Force for the Virgin Islands. And this was created after the hurricanes because every state, every territory has to create a task force that looks at children's needs. So this is year 7. It wasn't easy. Rod is on, I don't know if he's still here. He's on the task force. And I remember when I first met him, I said, Rod, you need to come to the task force. He said to tell them, you know, he was afraid. I said, can you give us like a spiritual message? He was shocked because he was like, a spiritual message? I said, yeah, you're Baha'i. Like, you don't know what Baha'i is? And so the therapists, the doctors, everyone were profound. They were like, because he was speaking to children, the need for, no matter what agency we worked for, whatever church we were a part of, that the true destiny of a people is looking at the youths. And so one of the things that I've done with a lot of members of the task force, including Ron, is to go where children are. So sometimes on Saturday, as exhausted as I am, I go to the beach with them. A bunch of kids hanging out on the beach, different schools, just want to hear from them, kind of like what they see the world. Because the way they see the world is very different from us. They look at tablets, technology, pretty much as their God. And so the world, what we try to do is share with them that you are not your own God. That even though you love technology and love being on tablets, that when you have the opportunity to swim and dive and laugh and giggle and dance, you should. Because the world is teaching young kids not to have that socially emotional. When you spend time with your family at dinner, your grandparents, put the tablet down. And I think that when I look at different churches, I visit a lot of churches. I grew up Catholic. My mom is Baptist. I have friends who are Methodist. This is one of my churches I visit. And I spend time with kids, ask them, why don't you go to church? And my grandmother's taking me. But do you know who God is? Have you, no matter what faith it is, are you reading a text? Are you reading, who is showing you that you are not your God, or you are not the center of the universe? And a lot of them say usually it's their grandparents, not their parents. But I think that when I have the opportunity and young people ask me, whether I teach at university or I hang out with kids, and they say to me, how do you become who you become? I said, God. What does God mean to you? So I begin to have a conversation with them about what that is. So I have friends who are Muslims, I have friends who are Palestinian, and I open myself to understanding their culture and how they were brought up and how they see their faith and how their faith is different from me. So I think with young people, the more you show them love, the more you open up what it means to be, for example, my friend who is Jewish, she said to me, I didn't even know what that meant. And her parents were in the Jewish community. I have friends who are Muslims, and they grew up with their parents, and they didn't even know what that meant, but they just went along with their traditions. But I think with this generation, they are questioning all beliefs. And don't be afraid when they do that. Embrace it, okay? And that's what I wanted to share.
Our last speaker is our own rabbi, Rabbi Julia Margolis. And then we'll have time for people to just mill around and talk, and we will have some snacks after this program.
Thank you. So first of all, I want to ask, with the power invested in me, that all these amazing speakers that are here today, can you please send your topics and your writings to me and to Barbara, because if it's okay with you, I would like that we will publish it in our bulletin, because I think this work that was done for today is just absolutely fascinating and so interesting that I think it's worth to share it with others. So the subject that I decided to talk about tonight is about women in our times. And I will start by talking about the Western Wall. And Western Wall is often called by the Hebrew name of the Kotel. And it is the last remaining structure of the ancient temple complex, because the first temple traditionally associated with King Solomon was destroyed by Babylonians in 586 BCE, and then the second temple was destroyed in 70 CE by Romans. So for nearly 2,000 years, Jews have turned towards this place in prayer and in hope. And when people stand before the wall today, they feel that they are touching this living memory of Jewish history. And because this site is so sacred, the question of how prayer is conducted there carries very, very deep meaning. So today, this plaza of the prayer is under the administration of ultra-Orthodox authorities who maintain very strict gender separation between man and woman. Women are generally not permitted to read from the scrolls of Torah. They do not allow to wear tallit, to put it filivin, though those practices are permitted for men. It was in response to these restrictions that Women Off the Wall was founded in 1988. The movement began when a group of Jewish women from different countries gathered at the wall during a Jewish conference. When they attempted to pray together and read from the Torah, they were told that such practices were not allowed in the women's section. Again, there were women standing in the women's section trying to pray. When what began as a single moment of frustration soon grew into a movement that would continue for decades. And among the key leaders of this movement is my friend and my personal hero of our days, Anat Hoffman, who served as a chair of this organization for many years. And Hoffman became one of those most visible voices that advocates for all these decades for women's prayers rights at the Kotel. And she often described the struggle as a simple question of belonging. The Western Wall belongs to the entire Jewish people, and therefore women should be able to pray there according to our own traditions. Another very important leader is Yochi Rappaport, who has helped to guide this organization in the recent years as an executive director. And she works tirelessly to organize the group activities and to build a lot of support through around the world. One of the most meaningful traditions of Women of the Wall is their monthly prayer gatherings on Rosh Chodesh, the beginning of each new Jewish month. Rosh Chodesh has long been associated with very long tradition in Judaism that this is when women gather together, they sing, they pray, they read together. So sometimes these prayers are very, very joyful and musical, and other times they are very tense, and they're surrounded by police and by protest and opposition. But yet these amazing women return every month, year after year, month after month, in hot weather, in cold weather, in rain, in snow, sometimes in Jerusalem. Over the decades, these gatherings have produced many, many powerful moments. Again, for me, it was just a few months ago when my own daughter decided that she's having her second bat mitzvah after she had it here with Women of the Wall in Jerusalem. And Women of the Wall fought for its struggle through the legal system. And after many years of different court cases, there was a very, very important and very significant ruling in 2013 that determined that the women's prayer services did not violate any law. Although the debate over the prayer at the wall continues until today, and we know that just a week ago, the ruling was again against the ruling of 2013, and now there will be a new ruling, hopefully that will not go and will not be passed in the Knesset, but perhaps someone hopes that if the Women of the Wall will continue to pray, and they might go to jail for 7 years. So we spoke today about so many different women in different traditions, different faiths. We talked about Miriam, and we talked about Esther and Deborah and Mary and Martha. And history is not only something that happened long ago. It's also something that unfolding in our own time, in front of our own eyes. And for women who gather each month at the Western Wall, they, as I said, for me, those are heroes of our own generation, and their courage is not expressed in books yet, but it will be. And they stand at one of the most sacred places in the world for many people, and they are part of the Jewish history for all of us, and of course they are part of Jewish history of women. And on this International Women's Day, the example invites us to ask us a very, very important question. So what does it mean to create a Jewish future in which every voice can be heard in prayer? So the story of Women of the Wall suggests that change often begins with a very small group of women with a lot of determination, and people that believe that holiness must include dignity and equality. And because of their efforts, that echoes of different voices of women from all over the world, this is why it rises so strongly from the stones of the Kotel and joining the prayers of generations before them and generations that will come after them. Thank you. Any questions? Yes. Thank you. And it's all over the world. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for this amazing afternoon, for joining us. And I think our desserts and our amazing food is almost there.
Yeah, we have a few snacks, and maybe people would feel more comfortable talking to some of our speakers, you know, just in informal setting, as opposed to getting up. So feel free to do so.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, great.